How is Diego Pavia taking command of this offense?
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with the booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for you, everyone, every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. As Vandy embarks on practice number 10, CJ Taylor is named to the Bednarik Award watch list. The defensive line continues to anchor the defense. And as the offense continues to try and find rhythm, how is Diego Pavia taking command of this offense? Well, in the quarterback race, which has been tight for 9 practices and a scrimmage, Nate Johnson has done a tremendous job competing as far as with Diego Pavia and all the things that he had, all the potential barriers that he had that was standing in his way of a starting job. I think when you take all those things into account, it's been a really, really good effort for what Nate Johnson has been able to put up. But honestly, Diego Pavia is starting to pull away from this in this quarterback race, and it comes down to the command that he has of the offense, the command that he has in the obviously in the huddle at the line of scrimmage, things like that. Now, he does have his limitations, and I think that's why this race is still somewhat tight, and they still haven't officially named a starter. And I think some of that's gamesmanship. They're not going to name a starter up, so that Virginia Tech does have something to prepare for. They're going to wait so that, if Virginia Tech wants to prepare for Pavia, they can, if they want to assume that he's going to be the starter. But let's just say there's a plot twist and Nate Johnson ends up winning this thing late. You never know. So they want to keep Virginia Tech guessing. I imagine there's a little bit of gamesmanship there. But it's something that we already knew, okay? And this is something that didn't quite play out that way to start, because I think, Pavia was a little bit nervous in his first live reps with the team. I think Nate Johnson came out really strong based on all his reps from the spring, the rapport that he built in the spring. He came out really, really strong. But as Pavia gained confidence, I think some of that pressure started to mount on Nate Johnson, and the command that he has of the offense, the checks, the being able to coach guys on the fly, being able to put the ball in the proper spot, all of the things that you need to command an offense, Diego Pavia was doing. And in doing so, I believe it put pressure on Nate Johnson to feel like he has to outperform that. He's not going against Diego Pavia. He's going against an entire system. He's having to overcome somebody who is got his master's degree in this system, essentially. And Nate Johnson is just vying for his bachelor's degree, which in any other case would have been perfectly fine. And I think Nate Johnson would thrive in this system. But we're starting to kind of see a little bit. Today's practice was a little bit rougher than the scrimmage for Nate Johnson. I mean, Nate Johnson is starting to kind of get into a bit of a slump. He's starting to kind of feel the pressure a little bit and the weight of this quarterback race as he decide, or in his own mind decides that it's an insurmountable lead. Now, I'm a big fan of Nate Johnson. I was a big fan of him the day he committed. I didn't know who he was at when they first played Florida, when he was at Utah, and I was like, who is this Nate Johnson guy? He just cooked the Gators, which brings joy to my heart because anytime you see Florida lose, that's always good. But seeing what he was able to do explosively, and then as he committed, I started watching some whatever film I could get my hands on of that. There was the game against Baylor where he led them on that drive, and he was able to display his range of abilities, and he has those. I think he's going to be a really, really good quarterback. It's just that the unfortunate situation that he is in is that the one person that probably could have beat him out for this job is here. And that's no shot at Nate Johnson. I think Nate Johnson's done a tremendous job. Diego Pavia just comes in already a leg up in that regard. I think Nate Johnson tried to get it to where they were on equal footing as far as command, as far as knowledge. But it just didn't quite pan out that way yet. And I'm saying all this like Pavia is named the starter. I think it's starting to get to a place to where it's just a formality at this point. I think, unfortunately for Nate, we're getting to this point, and you have to kind of realize that. You have to kind of understand that it's not something against. It's not a shot against Nate Johnson. It's not saying that he is bad. All right, for one quarterback to start does not mean the other quarterback has to be bad. It just means that, hey, he gives us a slightly better chance to win because of XYZ, and XYZ right now is important than PDQ, which Nate Johnson brings. If this offense was if this team, this program was in a slightly different spot, I think you might. I think the tone of this and the evaluation portion of this competition might be slightly different. Like, you might be able to go with the more athletic, more explosive, bigger arm guy. Because if there's an identity already established, you might be able to kind of fit into that, right? But that's what this team was lacking the most last year. And you have a guy that fits perfectly with the coordinator and the head coach of the offense, is what Jerry Kill's calling himself. You have somebody that fits perfectly with that. It's almost silly not to go with that. And I think that's where we're headed. And the fact that this is a legitimate competition tells you everything you need to know about Nate Johnson. He's good. The quarterback room is in good hands. Reading the practice reports would lead you to believe otherwise, but that's what preseason camp is for. You make the mistakes now, you clean them up so that you're ready to go. I think the closer this thing gets to the Virginia Tech game, I think you're going to start to see the reps split out gradually. I don't think they want to do it drastically right now because, again, a little bit of gamesmanship there where they want to throw Virginia Tech off the scent a little bit. So when you're distributing the reps, I think once you establish a guy, I think everything else will fall in line, right? Because right now the receivers are out of rhythm because they're just not sure. Like, when there's things that are up in the air, things are a little tighter. And when things are a little tighter, that's when offenses kind of tend to fall apart because you get misalignments, you're thinking too hard, you're pressing, all that stuff, right? And I think that's why Nate Johnson has kind of taken some steps backwards, because I think he's pressing a little bit and he's kind of worked himself into a little slump, and now his confidence is down a little bit, and you can kind of tell, right? The receivers are a little bit off, okay? And part of that could be they're missing, which I think might have been the most important piece, but London Humphreys, Will Shepard, and Jade McGowan, like, they're missing those pieces. And London Humphreys is crushing it in Athens. So that might be one of the biggest losses Vandy had in the portal because of the impact that he's making down in Athens. He could have made that here in Nashville. But knowing what he knows now, maybe he goes, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But he's doing well down in Athens. But this, this competition, I think it disrupts a little bit. And obviously, this is not the only quarterback competition around. There's other competitions around other programs. Even at the NFL level, it disrupts things a little bit. I think you need to settle in on somebody so that you can get valuable reps with the starter. And same with the receivers. You have to find that core group of guys to where now, okay, here's your first group, here's your second group. Let's get in a rhythm. Let's get this operation down. Let's get things right. And I think eventually that'll happen. So I'm not one to panic, because there's still installing stuff. They're still tinkering with stuff. There's a competition going. They don't know who the starting receivers are yet. There's a lot of things that are up in the air. The one thing that's not up in the air right now, the one thing that is happening, and we can tell it's happening, we knew it was going to happen, and this was the reason why Diego Pavia was in the driver's seat as soon as he committed, was his command of the huddle, his leadership qualities. I think because of his knowledge, he has a lot more confidence right now because he knows. And he's trying to pass that along, which it's not going probably as well as he would want it to, because it's still a little bit sloppy and there's some receivers that still haven't really stepped up at all. But it's happening. And, I think for Vandy, this resolution could be a really, really good thing. And this thing could really kind of almost get us set now to take on Virginia Tech. And I guess the sooner we realize that, the sooner things can get kind of in order a little bit, and the offense can find its rhythm, because the defense is certainly doing so. So, but I mean, how does the wide receivers get in tune? How do you find a receiver that's going to step up? Who is going to be that guy? How do we know who those guys are going to be? Well, we'll tell you in just a minute. Hey, this episode's brought to you by FanDuel. Check it out. I love sports. I love them so much, I never wanted them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports just aren't sportsing like we want them to. The FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer, which is rapidly coming to a close. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, welcome back. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen of the day. But for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On College Football podcast. Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron with discussion on the upcoming season and the ever-changing landscape of college athletics, including conference realignments, the transfer portal, NIL, new college football expanded playoffs, and more. Locked On College Football is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And speaking of you everydayers, thank you for all of your support. I certainly do appreciate it. I certainly do appreciate all the feedback that I receive. It's all extremely valuable, even when it comes from user 615-823-6123X-WCWH212. Even when it comes from that person, that's also valuable feedback. So the receivers, like, this is anytime your offense tries to find a rhythm, right? They need somebody to step up. Okay. And I'm hearing some of the names I'm hearing, this might actually turn into, despite all the transfer portal guys, this might actually turn into a youth movement. All right. One name I'm hearing as somebody that really, really needs to be elevated into the starting units is Joseph McVay. He's somebody that is starting to perform a little bit. He's starting to kind of get after it, and he's starting to make plays. Him and Tristan Brown just might find themselves in the lineup. Two guys that I really wasn't expecting to be in this position. I knew they were good. I knew they were fast. I knew they were explosive and good receivers. But you just, with all the portal guys, you just don't know, like, where they kind of fit in. Like, where are they going to get some snaps? Where are they going to be rotational guys? These guys might end up being starters 2 or 3 games into the season, maybe even out of camp. I mean, these two guys are stepping up. Junior Sherrill, I think, is starting to take the lead a little bit. I think he was kind of up and down, and I think that's somebody also that could be in there. Loic Foungy is a receiver that he's trying to make some noise. He's maybe there by default because he's such a big target that you just put him out there, run some hitches, some curls, some things just to deliver the ball his way and just get some yardage down the field. But I think, honestly, the receivers, what you need to look for is you need to find somebody with the skill set that can get you yards after the catch, that can run crossing routes across the field, things that and run and do things that can be dangerous at a short to intermediate level, especially given the fact that Diego Pavia seems to be the guy right now. You're not really going to push the ball vertically a whole lot with Pavia in the game. I think that's going to happen more rare than if Nate Johnson was in, and that might be an avenue for Nate Johnson to come in, and he might be your shot guy, your explosive run guy. But I think you have to have people that can run screens, that can run jet sweeps, that can take a slant from 5 yards to 20. I think you need somebody that can run digs, crossing routes, mesh routes, things like that really take advantage of defenses horizontally instead of vertically. I think if you can create some vertical space and just give the illusion that you're going to take a shot and maybe take a shot down the field occasionally, I think you have to have that horizontal threat. And when you have a tight end group as good as this tight end group is, which Tyler Fortenberry is starting to kind of get in the mix a little bit too. But you have Cole Spence and you have Eli Stowers at that position. So you can do some 12 personnel stuff. You can do some jet sweep stuff. You can do some things with your receivers without having the ball travel more than 20 yards down the field that can be considered explosive. And if you're going to do that, you've got to have guys that get yards after the catch. Now, from a receiver standpoint, okay, in order to separate yourself, okay, here's kind of the psychology of what's going on with them a little bit. And I think this is kind of what I anticipate. This is kind of what I think they're thinking from the receiver group. Okay, now they're thinking, I've got to make plays. All right, we're in a competition too. So there's pressure on me to win this rep against a group of cornerbacks that are performing quite nicely, although they're dropping like flies. I don't know what the injury bug has found them so far, but it's the pressure of having to win every rep, make every catch, perform, and score on every play in the scrimmage. Like I think the pressure is starting to kind of, I don't think it's starting to. I think it has been this way since the start of camp. But they have, with the room as packed as it is, with as many guys as there are, with as many spots as there is up for grabs, which all the spots are up for grabs at the receiving spots because there's nobody really that's there that they're like, okay, that guy's a surefire starter. I think that breeds a little bit of competition there. And you're starting to see the separation of guys who can handle it, guys who can't. And I think the two freshmen, McVay and Tristan Brown, can handle it. I think Quincy Skinner can handle it, although I think he needs to be a little bit more consistent. Junior Sherrill starting to be able to handle it as well. Loic Foungy is bouncing back and forth, but you don't really know about him. Jeremiah Dillon is falling apart. Richie Hoskins is kind of a dark horse in this whole thing, and he might see some time where he looks at the roster and goes, yeah, all these guys that they brought in, yeah, that screws me over. But he might just find himself in there, and so there's something to be said about these reps and how they're distributed and the opportunities that they're getting. I think you're starting to see kind of where the identity of this receiving core is going to shake out. You need quick, fast, explosive guys in short distances, because that's what you're going to need in order to move this ball down the field. Any semblance of vertical, you've got to have guys that are quick at the line of scrimmage and can get off press coverage, because defenses are going to compress down and say, hey, I dare you to go over the top, because we know you can't, right? They're going to see that. They're going to challenge that. And if you have guys that can't really win short, then you're not really going to have anything. And so these guys know it, and they're pressing themselves on it. And now they can't make the plays that they need to. They're dropping the ball. They're misaligning. They're running routes at inconsistent depths. I mean, there's just all kinds of like mental busts and things that are happening, because I think they're trying to figure out exactly what is needed from them, exactly where they need to fit in. I think some of them are starting to look into the numbers a little bit as far as the depth chart goes, and they're saying, okay, my reps are shrinking. What's going on here? Or like, hey, this, they see Tristan Brown make a play and they're like, oh crap, the freshman is going to jump all of us. And there's just a whole lot of things swirling around in their minds, I think, that they can't seem to kind of function. And I think it would help if at least one of those three guys would have stayed. And I think the guy that was kind of the glue guy, which Shepard and McGowan, Shepard was kind of like your big play guy, like your big explosive guy. McGowan was kind of like your all-around guy. And then London Humphreys was just the glue, man. And I think if London Humphreys stays around, I think if you have a glue guy like that, maybe this group performs a little better. Like, I just don't think there's a veteran guy in that group that can sit there and kind of coach these guys up and say, all right, well, I'm going to take this spot. All of you guys compete for this spot. I'm going to help you do it so that we can win. You don't really have that. And you need that. And this group needs that. And so this group, when they finally figure it out, they're going to be pretty good because they got guys of all different skill types. Then they can hurt you all a lot of different ways. But I think once they kind of figure out, once they kind of officially settle in on Pavia, which honestly is going to happen, they can start to plan their attack a little bit better. They can start working those short intermediate routes. They can start working off press coverage because they're going to have to, and they can start doing the things that they need to in order to win against defenses that are going to play them a certain way, stop the run, force them to push the ball vertically, challenge them to push the ball vertically, and that's how Vandy's going to have to win. They're going to have to manufacture. They're going to have to manufacture explosive plays. They're going to have to force some shot plays, hopefully not to the detriment of a turnover, but they're going to have to push some of this stuff down the field if they're going to have a chance. But all else fails, if the other team doesn't score, none of this matters. And the defensive line is going to make sure that happens. And CJ Taylor's on the Bednarik Award watch list. We'll talk about all things defense next. eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, welcome back. We're wrapping up the show here. Segment number 3. Thank you for making Locked On Vandy your first listen. If you want to follow the show at Locked On Vandy, get in on the train while it's still rolling slowly. Because when this thing goes full steam ahead, you'll wish you were on the train, and I'll still welcome you. It's okay. Don't you worry about that. So I told you to make Locked On Vandy always your first listen, of course, but make Locked On College Football your second listen, and then after that, Locked On SEC, Chris Gordy. Let's get that going. Let's get that cooking. So we are closing in on this thing. We are getting closer and closer to Virginia Tech game, and honestly, some more answers on the defensive side of the ball are starting to emerge. Like, the defensive line is going to start to become a key focal point of this defense. When you kind of look at how this defense was constructed at first, because there was a lot of mystery. I don't want to say unproven guys or like a lot of question marks, because question marks implies that it was bad, which I don't think it ever was bad. I just think we just didn't know much about exactly how this defensive line would shake out, both scheme and personnel wise. So I've always kind of maintained that this defense was built from the secondary forward, but what we're learning now, the secondary is still equally as good. Okay, don't get it twisted, especially the safeties. and the Bednarik Award watch list finalist CJ Taylor. But the defensive line is going to be a key focal point of this defense, okay? And they're the group that's going to kind of make this thing go a little bit. And it's becoming a thing. It's going to be a thing that when you watch this defense play, you're going to be really excited about watching this defensive line go, because they're going to get pressure. They're going to wreak havoc. They're going to move. They're going to crash gaps. They're going to disrupt things. And they're going to be something that is hell to work against. And they did all of that in practice, in the 10th practice, in yesterday's practice. They did all of that. They were brilliant, man. Bradley Mann, he's becoming disruptive. Corday Sidnor is becoming somebody that is just emerging as a leader, a vocal leader, a guy that has a lot of versatility. Zaylen Wood, also the two defensive line transfers, can play kind of all across the board there. Those guys are starting to become valuable pieces to this puzzle. Aeneas D. Cosmo, Darren Agu, they're getting healthier, so they're going to improve, and they're going to get in on the action. So this is something that I think Clark Lee, I don't know if he anticipated it, but I think he's certainly welcoming this, and I think this is somewhat of a surprise, because there was injured guys that were just okay last season, probably for a lot of reasons that aren't their fault. They've been involved in a better strength and conditioning program since January. They're in a better scheme since last season. They've grown and developed, just generally speaking, and they've just kind of found their groove. Javon Hay is a great defensive line coach as well, and he's doing a great job down there, coaching those guys and getting those guys ready for play. And I think the fact that there's so many names and the fact they're going to have to rotate a little bit tells you about kind of where the depth was and kind of where it is now. And that speaks to the development of this defensive line and this defensive front. I think there's a lot of belief there that this group can really be the havoc-causing defense. They can be the ones that push the pocket. They can be the ones that force quarterbacks into bad throws. You saw that in the scrimmage, and you've seen that in various 11-on-11 periods, and red zone periods, and team-focused, team-oriented periods, especially live ones, that this defensive line is really, really tough to deal with. And they're tough to deal with because they're athletic. They can move. They're a lot stronger than they were this time last year. And they're a lot more savvy than they were this time last year. The defense actually has an identity, so they kind of know what the objective is. I think there's a lot to be said physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever the case is. This defensive line is good. And a good defensive line breeds good linebackers, because a good defensive line just kind of takes everything up front and draws and commands attention from those guys. And these linebackers are left to roam free. When your defensive line is getting killed, guess who else is getting killed? Your linebackers are getting massacred. That's not happening right now, at least not in practice. I don't know, like against the Texases and the Bamas of the world. We'll see how it translates. I'm optimistic about it. I think it'll translate quite nicely. And guys like CJ Taylor will benefit because he's going to be all over the place. There's going to be pressure. There's going to be tip passes at the line of scrimmage. There's going to be bad throws that are forced because Zaylen Wood or Corday Sidnor is bearing down on the quarterback, and he doesn't want to take another one. He doesn't want to take another helmet to the chin. There's going to be all kind of things that happen because this defensive line is creating more of a sense of urgency for the opposing quarterbacks, which is something that they lacked all last year. The pass rush was terrible. So let's talk about CJ Taylor for a second. He made the Bednarik Award watch list, which is a huge, huge deal. To have a Vandy player on that watch list to begin with is a huge deal. Now, there's a lot of great players out there. There's a lot of great defensive backs out there and a lot of great defenders. So it's going to be some stiff competition, but the fact that he's in the mix tells you what you need to know. The voters, the award voters, know that CJ Taylor's in a great scheme that will benefit him tremendously. They must know something about this defense that a lot of people don't. And he's going to have some opportunities to put up some numbers. And this is going to be fun to watch because he's going to play back deep. He's going to play up close to the line of scrimmage. He's going to move around a lot. I think there's going to be some creativity that Clark Lee's being coy about, that CJ Taylor's being coy about when they interview him, that this team is just kind of being hush-hush about it a little bit, that you're going to see kind of unleashed on the Hokies. And the defense is going to be fun to watch. They're going to be explosive. They're going to be havoc. They're going to be fun to watch. They're going to be good. And they're going to have to be, because the offense is going to need some time to kind of get their feet up under them, which is normal when you got a new scheme. So, but that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Vandy podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Networks. Thank you for listening. Make sure you behave yourself. We'll check you out. Check us out tomorrow. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Peace out. Anchor down.